wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
The wise man begins everything with the reserve clause. I will accomplish my goal if nothing shall occur to the contrary. This is the reason why we say that all goes well with him, and that nothing happens contrary to his expectation, because he bears in mind the possibility of something happening to prevent the realization of his projects. It is an imprudent confidence to trust that fortune will be on our side. The wise man knows how great is the power of errors, how uncertain human affairs are, how many obstacles there are to the success of plans. Without committing himself, he awaits the doubtful and capricious issue of events, and weighs the certainty of purpose against the uncertainty of result. Here also, however, he is protected by the reserve clause, without which the wise man does nothing and begins nothing. Seneca, On Benefits 4.34. Welcome to the Sunday Stoic Podcast, where we discuss the ancient philosophy of Stoicism and how it applies to modern life. Today will be a solo episode with me, Dan Monks of Queens, New York City. A little word of warning, I am recording in the afternoon this time, and I usually try to record in the mornings because the city is usually quieter. So you may hear some occasional jet engines or car horns or sirens in the background, and that's the songs of the city. As Stoic practitioners, we sincerely wish for the betterment of external circumstances and to benefit our fellow humans. We earnestly strive to make the world a better place. This is part of what it means to fulfill our human nature as social beings. The cardinal virtue of justice governs our relationships with our fellow humans and is tied into the discipline of action. When we take action, there is risk involved. Sometimes we will accomplish our goals, but many times we will fail in our aim to improve the world. When that occurs, there is the risk that we will suffer emotional turbulence and fall under the grip of a passion, particularly anger or fear. But remember, the only true good is virtue, and we cannot maintain our progress toward virtue if we are under the grip of a passion, and anger is the most dangerous passion of all. So, we want to help people, but we also want to keep our judgments in conformity with nature while doing so. How do we do that? There is so much injustice and suffering in the world right now. How can we fail in our attempts to help and not become enraged? It's not easy, that is for certain. The ancient Stoics had many techniques to mitigate the passions, but today I will discuss one in particular. One vital technique suggested by the ancient Stoics is known as the reserve clause. What the reserve clause entails is recognizing in advance the nature of what we are attempting. When we try to improve the world, we are dealing with something external to ourselves, which means we are dealing with something that is ultimately not up to us. We will do our best to succeed in improving the world, but the outcome is ultimately not under our control or up to us. Remember that the only things under our control or up to us are our judgments, opinions, our desires and aversions, and our impulses to act. So our impulse to act is up to us, but the outcome is not. The way we implement the reserve clause is to take a moment before taking action to improve the world by internally stating to ourselves, I will accomplish X, fate permitting. There are alternative forms available to suit your worldview. For example, for our more secular-minded brothers and sisters, I will accomplish X if nothing prevents me, or I will accomplish X, circumstances permitting. God permitting, divine logos, providence, fortuna, cosmos, Zeus. It can take any form, as long as you are acknowledging that the impulse to act is up to you, but the ultimate outcome is not up to you. One potential danger that people cite when they first learn of the reserve clause is that they think it will result in a lack of commitment on the part of the Stoic practitioner. that recognizing that external circumstances may prevent success gives us an out. The ability to give up at the first sign of difficulty. Oh, bummer. Things didn't go the way I had hoped. So much for that. No. The reserve clause does not lead us to give up at the first difficulty. As Pierre Hadot said, Stoic intentions are not good intentions, but rather intentions that are good. In other words, firm, determined, and resolved to overcome all obstacles. Pierre Hadot, Inner Citadel. This firm, determined resolve is best expressed by Cicero's archer. If a man were to make it his purpose to take a true aim with a spear or arrow at some mark, his ultimate end, corresponding to the ultimate good as we pronounce it, would be to do all he could do to aim straight. The man in this illustration would have to do everything to aim straight, yet, although he did everything to attain his purpose, his ultimate end, so to speak, would be what corresponded to what we call the chief good in the conduct of life. Whereas the actual hitting of the mark would be, in our phrase, to be chosen, but not to be desired. Cicero, De Finibus, on the Ends of Good and Evil, Book 3.6. In Stoicism, the external outcome is to be chosen, but not to be desired. That is because the only thing appropriate to desire is virtue, and that which participates in virtue. You make progress toward virtue when you decide on an appropriate action to fulfill your social roles with justice and develop an impulse to act. When you fervently strive to change circumstances for the better, you have already fulfilled your purpose and your desire, because, while we would prefer that we succeed, we know that the outcome involves externals and are ultimately not up to us. Since external outcomes are not up to us, they have no bearing on our progress toward virtue, and are thus indifferent. We have already accomplished our goal when we do all we can to succeed in making the world better. When our social aims are thwarted, we have an opportunity to cultivate temperance by reminding ourselves through the discipline of desire and aversion that while we would prefer to better the world, our desire is for virtue alone, and our aversion is only to moral corruption or vice. If the person hindering your appropriate action is doing so with threats or even actual violence, it is an opportunity to cultivate courage, once again through the discipline of desire and aversion, where we remember that the only appropriate aversion is to our own moral corruption. Far from the reserve clause resulting in less effective attempts to better the world, I would argue that it raises the possibility of success. A Stoic intention or impulse to act is firm and determined. If our social aim is thwarted, the reserve clause helps the Stoic practitioner to dissipate emotional turbulence through changing this pursuit of justice to an opportunity to cultivate temperance or courage. When the Stoic practitioner avoids falling under the sway of a passion like anger or fear, it gives the practitioner the equanimity to perceive the situation as objectively as possible. That perspective allows the Stoic practitioner to evaluate the situation. If examination reveals that another attempt may result in success, perhaps from another angle or with a different tactic, then the Stoic practitioner can adjust and act again. If things appear insurmountable, it might be prudent to find another opportunity to fulfill social roles and better the world. What makes us less effective is mistakenly assigning the good to external outcomes, instead of to the process of pursuing justice. Humans cannot help but desire what they view to be the good. If we assign good to an external outcome or external circumstances, and we are thwarted in our desire to bring about an external outcome, it is likely we will fall into the grip of a passion, particularly anger. Passions like anger distort our perceptions, and we cannot act effectively or appropriately if we cannot properly perceive the world. Also, anger leads to all sorts of ill-considered and morally corrupt actions, which harms us as we slide toward vice. Brief recap. If you succeed in your efforts and help someone, you are making progress toward justice. If you fail in your attempt and resist the temptation to become angry or fearful, you make progress toward temperance or courage. So, regardless of outcome, you are becoming a better and more virtuous person. That is what Marcus Aurelius was referring to when he wrote that the obstacle is the way. Insofar as some men obstruct me in my natural activities, man enters the class of things indifferent to me, no less than the sun, the wind, or the wild beast. By these indifferents, indeed, some special action may be impeded, but no interference with my purpose or with my inward disposition can come from them, thanks to my acceptive and modifying powers. That which impeded action thus becomes profitable to action, and that which blocked the road allows me to advance along the road. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, Book 5.20. If we are hindered in our attempt to cultivate justice through appropriate action, then it becomes an opportunity to cultivate temperance by reminding ourselves that external outcomes are indifferent. And if the person hindering us is doing so by threatening our physical well-being or a threat to some other external, like our freedom or reputation, it is an opportunity to cultivate courage by remembering that the only thing worthy of fear is the prospect of moral corruption. Try to persuade men to agree with you, but whether they agree or not, pursue the course you have marked out when the principles of justice point that way. Should one oppose you by force, act with resignation, and show not that you are hurt. Use the obstruction for the exercise of some other virtue, and remember that your purpose involved the reservation that you were not to aim at impossibilities. What, after all, was your aim? To make some good effort such as this? Well, then you have succeeded, even though your first purpose be not accomplished. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, Book 6.50. Order your life in its single acts, so that, if each as far as may be attains its end, it will suffice. In this no one can hinder you. But, you say, may not something external withstand me? Nothing can keep you from justice, temperance, and wisdom. Yet, perhaps some other external activity of mine may be obstructed. True, but by yielding to this impediment, and by turning with calmness to that which is in your power, you may happen on another course of action equally suited to the ordered life. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations, Book 8.32. Other traditions also recognize the importance and effectiveness of the reserve clause, and they make use of it. For example, Muslims implement the reserve clause when they say Inshallah, and Christians when they say God willing. Warning against presumption. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we shall go into such and such a town, spend a year there doing business, and make a profit. You have no idea what your life will be like tomorrow. You are a puff of smoke that appears briefly and then disappears. Instead, you should say, if the Lord wills it, we shall live to do this or that. Letter of James 4.13, New American Bible. Truth be told, I do not use the reserve clause for everything. For more day-to-day challenges like navigating traffic, I make more general use of the premeditatio malorum, otherwise known as the premeditation of adversity. I've made enough progress that the ordinary hassles of life rarely stir a proto-passion within me. So, personally, I reserve the reserve clause for actions where I foresee opposition to my success, in situations that I am in danger of attaching value to an external outcome. Implementing the reserve clause helps me to remember the nature of what I'm attempting, that it involves something external to me, and thus falls within the category of things indifferent. In those moments, the reserve clause helps me to maintain my equanimity and try to navigate adversity without falling into the grip of a passion. I am not perfect. It doesn't work all the time, but we are progressors and we are eternally striving toward the ideal. Lastly, a thought from Seneca. He who does many things often puts himself in fortune's power, and it is safest not to tempt fortune often, but always to remember her existence and never promise oneself anything on her security. I will set sail unless anything happens to prevent me. I shall be praetor, if nothing hinders me. My financial operations will succeed, unless anything goes wrong with them. This is why we say that nothing befalls the wise man which he did not expect. We do not make him exempt from the chances of human life, but from its mistakes. Seneca, on Peace of Mind, 13. Every one of us must do our part where we are and in the social roles we fill to make the world a better place for our fellow humans. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please send us an email at sundaystoic@gmail.com. If you enjoy our podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on whatever platform you use to listen to us. Your feedback helps us to reach new audience members and build the podcast. We look forward to releasing a new episode next week, fate permitting. And as Steve always says, Carpe Diem!